I am interviewing Ann Warner on Friday, November 25th, 2011. All right, Ann. Well, start us off with what was the happiest moment in your life?
Oh, wow. Happiest. Probably as a young person, it was my entrance into religious life the day I got the habit, and because I was convinced this was my life. Now, I've had lots of happiest days since also, but that was a peak moment.
How about the saddest?
When my father died, the day my father died, prematurely of cancer when he was 48 years old, 1965.
Wow. How old were you?
I was 19.
Had you become a nun already?
Yes, I was already, and I was teaching in Indianapolis, and I had requested to teach in Indianapolis because the administrators knew that he was dying, and they pretty much honored the tragedy of it. My mom had 9 kids at home yet.
Oh my.
And he was not 48 years old and had been dying for 2 years of cancer. Made himself a guinea pig for lots of chemotherapy. And while I say it was the saddest day of my life, it was also in some respects a very freeing thing. I knew when I went to the chapel to pray that morning that he left, that he was gone. I felt the separation. And so when the superior called me to the office out of the chapel, I said, "My dad died." And she just looked shocked. "How do you know that?" I said, "Well, he's been dying." And I just had a complete sense of peace. I knew he was at peace. I didn't know what it was going to mean for us in the aftermath. And so that's what threw me into the sadness of it. But initially, it was very peaceful and beautiful.
Did you take comfort in your religion when?
Yeah, yes, I did. And not. The 2 women in that house that I felt closest to, I woke up in the middle of the next night wanting to talk, and they had to be ready for their classes the next day too. My class was being covered so that I could go to the funeral home and be with my family, and it just they weren't able to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and just to
Did you try waking them up?
I did.
Yeah,
both of them. Each of them I went at different times. One of them did ask me if I went to the kitchen to try some hot milk. She would go down with me. I think maybe we did that. Warmed some milk and had milk and cookies. But that wasn't what I wanted at that time.
Yeah. So she didn't actually sit down and talk to you?
No. And I don't know what I would have said. There's just that vacuum. There's just a void. Your parents are still living yet, are they?
Yes. I couldn't imagine them not living. And what birth order? You said there were 8 or 9.
I'm 4th oldest of 13. Oh my. I have 6 brothers and 6 sisters.
What was it like growing up with such a big family?
Never a dull moment. And sometimes that was a happy thing, and sometimes it was the chaos would get to me. I always found quiet places to sneak away to, and consequently, I was already overweight. I say I was never little, I was only young, and that's the truth. I just was pudgy, and then plain fat. And so I was always fat and lazy, because my sneaking away was perceived to be avoidance of work or anything contingent. And yes, in some respects it was. The ones who weren't around didn't get called on as much to hop in.
Was it your siblings who called you fat and lazy?
No, my mother mainly. My mother was a very harsh critic. She was not the maternal type. She remembers my infancy with the story that I was made for the convent because I was always up at 5 o'clock and I was ready to be up. And so she was probably pregnant with my next sister already, and so she had no alternative but get me up, and I didn't want to just be up, but dressed and breakfast.
Yeah.
And so she would do all that and then set me in the playpen and finish her sleep on the couch. And I was content to entertain myself. I just expected to be up.
Wow. For your mother not to be maternal and have that many children.
I know. Now, some of my siblings disagree. They experienced her differently. And I honor that. That's okay. It's just...
Do you think she had favorites?
Well, if anybody, she favored me. She often put me in the car and took me off to talk about my 3 older sisters. My second oldest sister, there was always contention between her and my mom. They did more verbal disagreeing anyway, and Mom always wanted to pick my brain with what's going on with Jeannie, and until I was about 13, 14 years old, and I said, Jeannie would love to have this conversation with you. I wish we would just go home, because for some reason she was on an errand. Well, she probably always had to do errands.
Yeah.
She wrote most of her letters to me in the convent from a doctor's office, taking a kid to the doctor. So I don't remember how she responded to me, but she quit probing me about my sister at that time.
Did you have other mother-daughter moments, or was that the only time?
I know there was a time I looked most like her, and everybody said that I was my mother's clone, and I was. And I was proud of that. So I did and I didn't. It also brought the wrath of my sisters on me because they didn't like it that I had that attention.
Mm-hmm. And now you live by yourself?
Uh-huh.
Do you miss the chaos of
No, I
being
don't. Not one
around
bit.
so many people?
Not one bit. I thought the first time I lived with only 4 women in a house, I thought this is going to be shock. And I realized then that it's not. I just enjoy my own company, and I'm never without music or a book or something with a computer now. But I don't. I'm an introvert by nature. My brother defies me to prove that, and I said, because I have good communication skills doesn't mean that it doesn't wear me out.
Yeah.
I said, I spend a half hour talking. I need 3 hours
to recover,
just to reflect on, because the spoken word is so limited.
It is limited, and so's the written word.
Well, yes, that's true too.
When you write.
That's the neighbor coming by. The cats let me know when somebody's out there.
When you write.
Oh, well, Jellybean's still out. She's looking at him.
Yeah, I think Jellybean followed her.
He might have.
Yeah, when you read an email, you don't see the other person's expression,
I have a couple friends that want me to Skype. I even own a camera that I can attach to the computer, and I did. When I first got it, I was all enamored of it and thought, I'll try this out, but I'm not that engaged in it. Doc was just asking me that Wednesday.
About Skyping?
Skyping, and I said, my response to them is, I enjoy a face-to-face visit, but I'd rather have it person-to-person.
Right. But Skyping is the next best thing, to person-to-person. Yeah.
My very best friend from, she's a woman that grew up in Cincinnati, and we were both we convinced ourselves we were the dummies of our class in throughout high school, because we couldn't be bothered with fighting for those A's and B's. The other women who excelled they were obsessed with accomplishing. And one of our teachers got after both of us, and I said, it's not that I don't want it, I don't need it.
So, did you not do your work, or?
Oh yeah, I did.
And that still didn't net you an A?
This same teacher gave me a D in the fall of my senior year.
Oh my goodness.
And to shock me into a better performance. And she said I didn't satisfy her with any kind of confrontation, so she finally approached me before the day before my folks were coming for a visit. She said, I guess I'm going to need to talk to your parents about that D. What do you plan to say to him? I said, it's not my grade. Well, she said, what do you mean by that? I said, it doesn't reflect my class participation, my homework, my testing grades. I don't perform at that level. I'm too proud to get a D. Oh. She said, well, what are you going to tell them? I said, I'm going to tell them exactly what I'm telling you.
Yeah. Did she change the grade?
She did, after she talked to them. Mm-hmm.
What were your parents' reaction? What did they...
My dad always took things exactly like I said it. He believed me implicitly. And that's really the only one I cared about. I think my mother agreed. I just couldn't be that competitive.
Are you not still?
Oh, I can be very competitive. Put me at a card table or in a game of Scrabble. Yes, I do have that reputation now. That's funny to think of that.
Did that come later, the competitiveness?
I guess maybe. A lot of people think it's natural just when they hear you're from that large a family, and I imagine some of that goes with it. I always fought with my mouth. I could fist punch and bite. I went through those phases of unfair fighting when I was a kid, but I could always do something more with my tongue. And one time said my tongue should be a registered weapon.
Who said that?
I did.
Oh.
Said it about myself. I realized that I had the power to really sting, and usually with a humor. Usually using a mean humor.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else would laugh, but the one that knew I was being critical at their expense. And I quit that when I came to that realization. I thought, well, that's not nice. That's not fair.
So you don't do that anymore? A stinging Ann. Did you ever overcome that belief that you were the dummy in this class?
I never tried to. By the time I realized why I was doing it, in fact, I was grateful to her for confronting me with that boldly. And I realized all the while that I knew enough to satisfy myself, and that's what learning was for. It was for my own personal awareness and not to be demonstrative for anybody else. So I took that with me into the classroom and won many underachievers over by just telling them that what they're achieving is for themselves and not because they're in any kind of pecking order in the classroom.
And you were successful in convincing some
Most
students?
of them, yeah. Later, when I dealt with addicts, not so much so. Addicts, they had their own skewed interpretation of what achieving was, and that was getting by.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned your father. Was he the most important person in your life?
Very much so. He always chose me to ride with him in the car because I didn't sleep. I would stay awake and it would keep him awake when we were driving from Indianapolis to Monticello. And he sang in the choirs, and I used to know the words to all the song, and I would sing with him. She wants to be interviewed now, too. She's my chatty cat.
So you lived in Indianapolis. You grew up in
Our birth home was Indianapolis, but from the time I was 10 years old, somewhere in the mid-50s, we bought the cottage up here, and so...
Where is the cottage?
It's on the west side of Freeman Lake, south of the airport.
Okay. Is it still? Does your family still own?
No, we don't. When Mom died in 2006, we put it up for sale, and I was just reminding two of my brothers this morning my experience. I was living there alone while we were in the process of selling it, so when the realtor would let me know somebody was coming to see it, I would vacate. And this one time they didn't make it to the appointment. When I came home, I realized that they hadn't been there. And then an hour or so later, they showed up. And so I grabbed my coat and was ready to head out the door. And the person who now owns it was the buyer that was looking. She said, "I don't mind if you stay. I'd be glad to ask you some questions about it."
Mm-hmm.
So I did. I didn't leave then. Her main puzzlement was, it's such a lovely location and such a quaint cottage. Why were we getting rid of it? And I said, because it was hard to divide a piece of property between 13 children who were spread all over the United States by now. And the ones of us that wanted to keep it couldn't afford it. And the ones that wanted a place like it already had waterfront property. So I said, and mainly just because we enjoyed it for 50 years and we're finished. It's time for someone else to enjoy it, the lake.
So you grew up in Monticello then since you were 10?
A sense of it. From Memorial Day was usually about the end of the school year. We'd pack all our stuff, summer stuff, in banana boxes from the grocery store, and my dad would haul us up here. We always had two carloads, and there was he would pack everything in the truck, and several of us rode with him in the truck, and then Mom followed in the station wagon.
Oh, so you lived in Indianapolis?
In Indianapolis
part of the time, and then stayed here during the summer?
We stayed here during the summer, and Dad came up on the weekends to be with us. Then Labor Day, school started up again. We all moved back to Indianapolis.
Which home did you prefer?
Oh, this one. I'm a summer person, and over the years have come to appreciate that I'm just a warmer climate aficionado. I'm not fond of sleet and snow, and especially the way we experience it here.
Right. And yet you're in Indiana.
I'm here.
Yeah.
I know. When I first started, I spend February in Sarasota because I have a brother that lives down there.
Oh, okay.
And 2 years ago, when I first started, I just was new with a HUD voucher, and I knew that if I stayed with HUD for a whole year, I could relocate to any of the 48 states in HUD properties. So I started doing a web search while I was in Sarasota. Well, when you get to a cities like that in the South, it means that you're going to be in federally funded housing, which is generally high crime areas.
Yes.
It's only up in this area you can be in federally funded housing that is not crime areas.
Right.
And I checked South Carolina because I have a sister I'm very close to that lives there. And the more I checked, the more I decided, stay put. Just.
Do you have any relatives nearby?
I have a brother that still lives down on Freeman, about a half mile north of where we grew up on the lake there. And so I spent yesterday at his home, and his daughter lives across the street from him, and so that was family. One brother's family. A brother from California had come into Indianapolis, and I got a call late Wednesday night when I joined the ones there are 4 siblings that still live in the Indianapolis area, and they wanted me to come down for them. They were gathering later at night for just hors d'oeuvres and cards or dice or something. We usually play some games when we're together, and I didn't want to eat a whole turkey dinner and then hit the road, and I didn't want to stay overnight because I had promised this interview, and I said I'm not going to jeopardize that. But I said, by the time I talked to him, the brother from California, the next day, yesterday morning, I said, you're going to be leaving Indy early in the morning. I'm an early bird. Why don't you just plan to get off the road and stretch your legs and have another cup of coffee with me, and then I'll send you on to Chicago whenever you are ready to go. I won't keep you. I just would like to see you. And so that's what he did.
So he stopped here on his way.
So he stopped here this morning on his way.
Good.
Yeah, it was wonderful to see him.
Tell me about what made you decide to join the convent, become a nun.
It was a thing with Catholic families at the time. I was enamored of the nuns who taught in our grade school. There was such a hallmark of joy among them. They played together. They teased among one another. I used to run my dad's routes. He had some delivery routes. He carried beef. He owned his own beef business, and he would have me ride with him in his truck on Saturday to make some deliveries. And one of his stops was at the convent, where the superior had to get up from the card table to go get a check for him to pay him for the meat. And so she let him take over her hand. They were friendly enough that they let us go into their private community room where, and he would wreck it. He would deliberately ruin her hand. And I would watch him, and I knew enough about cards, and the other nuns knew what he was doing, and they were tickled. And so it just became a fun thing. And I thought, boy, I want a piece of that. And so that really, my dad worked actively on my 3 older sisters. He wanted a daughter in the convent. He quit doing that with me. And I don't know if somewhere along the line somebody intervened to stop the pre-selection business. They didn't even know it was on my mind until I was in 8th grade, and I got this mail from Oldenburg. It was an application for to be a freshman at the convent boarding school. Mm-hmm. And Mom said, "Why are you getting mail from there?" And I said, "Well, I talked to my 8th grade teacher was the superior and principal at that time, and she was a woman I really, really admired. And so she sent for an application for me. And Mom says, "You'll never do it. You're too much of a homebody." I was such a homebody that my mother arranged for my first overnight with a friend when I was in 6th grade. And it wasn't until she didn't tell me. She just had my friend ask me at school if I would spend the night. And I thought that was unusual, but I enjoyed her friendship, and so I said, all right. By the time I got to her house, I had put it together that it had been prearranged.
How did you?
I don't know how I just intuited it, and I resented it. And I apologized to my friend.
Did you resent your mother or your friend?
My mother. I realized then that it was all her doings, and I felt foolish. And so I said that to the friend. We talked a little bit about it. She said, "Don't worry." She said, "Let's just have fun." And so we did.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought, why didn't she talk to me?
Mm-hmm.
I was always, when I get one of those insights, she just went behind my back and did it. Why didn't she talk with me about doing it?
Do you, now looking back, do you think she was trying to do a nice thing for you?
I don't know.
Did you ever confront her?
No. Mm-mm. I don't remember that I did.
So by the time you were 13, you knew you wanted to
Mm-hmm.
go into the convent?
Well, I wanted to explore it. What I didn't want was to go to the high school that my sisters went to, another Catholic high school, but it was run by a different set of nuns, and all I heard were they had nicknames for all of them. The nuns had funny names, and they all the kids made fun of them and nicknamed them.
Oh.
And
What were the funny names? Were they just from a different...
Henrietta or Clara John or anyway, the one I liked was Mary Patrick. Patrick wasn't a woman's name, but it was typical. My first grade teacher was Sister Mary Stephen. I knew what I had. I didn't know. And I was, the main thing, really above and beyond what I didn't know about those nuns, was I had always been another Warner girl. And if they remembered any name, they remembered the second oldest sister who always made trouble.
Jeannie.
And I was always called Jeannie. And I thought, doggone, if I'm going to be in trouble, I want to make my own.
Yeah.
I want to go where I'm not another Warner girl. I got down to this convent boarding school.
Where was the boarding school?
At Oldenburg, Indiana, 65 miles southeast. And because of that whole socialization thing of my mom's, the notion that I wasn't sociable, you'll never make it. And I thought, by damn, I'll show her. I can make it. And my father was stunned because 2 semesters with room and board were like 1/4 of the cost of the diocesan high school. He couldn't believe that. He anticipated that they just couldn't afford to send me there. And when he saw the cost, he said, "We can't afford not to."
Right.
And so now he was getting some break, I guess, on having 3 at one school. By the time I would have gone to high school, the oldest sister would have graduated, so there'd still be 3 of us in high school, and I'm sure there was group rate, but...
What was it like going into that boarding school, having never...
never left home and being a homebody?
Yeah.
It was exciting. It was unusual, but I knew large family living. I knew when you sat down to the table and had enough potatoes for 6 people, it was like being at home and having family service dinner with everybody having their own piece of the pie. And so, and we all had our chores, and that was not different than home. Probably, if anything was different, it was having to keep more silence at night, and that was so the nuns didn't have to put up with giggly teenage girls.
Now, this boarding school, was it kind of like a training to become a nun?
It was college prep. It was intended that we would be teachers when we grew up.
And nuns.
And nuns,
yeah. So did all the girls who went to at school that they all become nuns?
I was in the group that wore convent prep. We wore brown uniforms and the other girls wore blue. And part of the rules were that we weren't supposed to talk with the blue uniforms because they always talked about boys or dating, and we couldn't be in the prom. We were desocialized by not living in the same quarters, not eating in the same dining room with them. And there were consequences if you crossed over. I would arrange for girls to meet me to ask for a bathroom break at study hall. We would meet in the restroom, and I would take them on the elevator up to the 4th floor, the attic area of the academy, where the nuns stored their belongings, their lockers, their foot locker, or what were they? Anyway, they all had their real names on them, because that was how they transported from home to enter the community. So we learned that Sister Patricia Ann was Charlene Wolf. And it was just big news to know their real names.
Yeah.
And
because when you became a nun, you took on a
different name. Yeah, I was
a saint's name.
I was Sister Mary Evo.
Evo,
an Italian form of John, like the short for Yvonne. But it was just Ivo, Evo, and he was a Franciscan saint whose anniversary was celebrated on my mom and dad's wedding.
Is that why you picked it?
And that's why I took it. The name didn't mean anything to me. I wanted to hook it to some family significance. And James, and every form of my dad's name, and Mary Lou was my mom's name, it was all taken. All forms of it were taken.
Yeah.
So I guess I never believed I would be stuck with it all my life. And when I said that I was going to be Sister Mary Evo, they teased me, my friends, deliver us from Evo, and you'll get the Evo eye. And so it was a lark, really. We teased, so played with it a lot.
Did you envy those blue uniform girls?
No. In fact, they were some of my best friends, and I always found ways to talk with them in class and pass notes. And
so, did you not want to date and have boyfriends at that age?
In the summertime, I watched my sisters date when I was home more, and there were several boys on the lake that I enjoyed, whose company I enjoyed, but we ran around as a crowd, not as couples. And so the boy that did ask me to marry him said that I couldn't smoke. He dared me to smoke a cigarette. He said, "You can't." I said, "I can smoke a cigarette." And so I did. I smoked a cigarette on one of our wild rides. Enough that he got off of that issue. And he was so shy, I was already in habit 3 years after I graduated from high school, and I had made my first vows, that temporary, but still had made, I promised to live for 3 years, or 5 years, or whatever. In temporary vows, you can extend it until after 5 years, you're supposed to make it permanent. But I was gung-ho. That was my path. And he asked to walk with me when I got a first home visit after Dad's death, and we were allowed to go home. I said, I wanted to go to the lake. And he was the neighbor right next door to us, and that neighbor lady always was trying to put us together. She so enjoyed me. She really pushed him.
And this was the boy's mother?
But the boy's mother, before he was ready. He was even so shy about asking me. And no wonder he was intimidated. I was in full habit, veil and all. And we were walking up the hill. He said, "It really is kind of difficult." And I said, "I understand." I said, "Larry, I enjoy your company for a lot. And there would have been a time that it might have changed my mind, but right now, I just made a promise for 3 years. I think I need to explore this facet of my life." And he wasn't on a career path yet, or I imagine he was in college.
How old was he? And how old were you?
Maybe 20. We were. I say that I entered when they still took children, because I didn't have any sense about forever until death. I just didn't, and I couldn't be convinced that he did. I really felt like it was more his mother talking, although he was sincere, and I did enjoy him, his company. We had fun together.
What happened to Larry?
Larry died at 35. Larry had a huge mole on his chin, just a real distinctive. I thought of it more as a birthmark, but it was a mole, and he had a very interesting job too, that sent him overseas a lot. I can't think it now exactly what it was. Something connected to military, but not in the military. And he met and married like a Pacific, maybe a Filipino woman, and she urged him to have that checked out, and he was recommended to have it removed, and it just sent cancer spreading all through him once they disturbed the site.
Once they removed it, it spread the cancer? So if he wouldn't have removed it, he would have been fine?
Maybe. Pardon me.
That's all right. Okay. And let's go back to your childhood. Do you what's your earliest memory?
Basically, as a very young child, I remember feeling ashamed of my weight and size, and clothes were never fitting right, and I was always, my mother was getting mad at me because when I was supposed to wear the hand-me-downs from my 3 older sisters, I had already outgrown them, and it was a frustration for her to find other ways to clothe me, and jealousy with my brothers and with my older sisters because I was getting new things because I couldn't fit into their things.
Yeah. Were you the tallest out of all?
Yeah, I was tall and fat. And but now I look at pictures. I wasn't that heavy when I was preschool. I might have packed on weight in school. I was more sedentary, although we played basketball, football, baseball. We rode bikes. We were active as kids, but we never lacked for food. There was always tons of it, and it was there was always arguments after a meal when one of the younger ones wouldn't finish their plates. We were the clean plate club, and I was finishing their plates so they didn't get in trouble. Or having to clean up after the meal, I would eat it.
And your father, you said he had his own business. Was he a
beef salesman?
Oh, he wasn't a butcher. He just sold the beef.
Well, right. He did know the butchering end, but my uncle did that. They were partners, and my dad did the business end. He made the contacts and took orders and processed and delivered.
Now, your mother with all those children, she couldn't have worked outside her home.
No.
Is there anything? How has your life been different than what you'd imagine?
I'm sure after the first year I was in the habit, I lost 100 pounds, and I weighed less at 19 than I had at 10. And I first experienced my body as beautiful, attractive, and it was safe in the habit because it was a very scary experience to think of myself as beautiful. And that was about the time that Larry proposed to me, because he had only known me as a pudgy, overweight person, and I even rationalized that I was more attractive at that point, that he would have wanted me more for my appeal, physical appeal. I had a lot of warped ideas as a young person, but
How'd you lose 100 pounds that first year?
Actually, that was the easiest 100 pounds ever, because you went to the table. 5 of us were told that we needed to lose weight. Well, the other 4 women got sick. I didn't, but we always walked. Our work was very physical. We were doing steps and long hallways. The institution, just by itself, made for needing to walk distances and climb steps. And you sat down to a meal. There were 6 pieces of meat, 6 eggs, or 6 pieces of bread, or 6 potatoes. The food was very portioned.
Yeah.
And when our parents would bring candy and cookies and special treats and visiting times, it was kept in a locked cupboard, and nothing came out except at times when the superiors decided it was treat time, and that didn't happen very often. And I was assigned jobs that didn't have a break. I wanted like mad to work in the kitchen and peel the vegetables and do all the food preparation. I never got to work. I got to work in the bread room, but I couldn't touch. I could cut all that fresh bread. Oh my God, the scent was heavenly, but I couldn't eat it. And by the time the kitchen people were taking their break, I had to leave that job and would go to the laundry or cleaning in the infirmary. Or
What a torture that must have been, inhaling all that fresh bread smell.
I love bread. Bread was still is my downfall. I love bread.
Well, is there anything else that you want to share?
Gosh, I can talk for years. I don't have trouble with reminiscing. Oh, thank you. You're going to look for Jelly Bean.
Yeah, let me see him. Oh, there he is.
Okay.
There's Jelly Bean.
He wonders what we're up to.
Hi, Jelly Bean. What made you decide to leave
community?
Yeah.
I have realized in probably around my 40s, I started having bouts of depression, and probably from the time that maybe a 10-15 year period, I had been in and out of 3 professional treatments for depression, and I was medicating depression, and I finally realized that the lifestyle was compromising my best emotional and mental stability, and that I didn't want to be a cause. I didn't want to be a weight. I knew that emotional and mental problems were really expensive to treat and not all that well. There wasn't as much known about it.
Mm-hmm.
I had been overseas, and I had had thrilling experiences in community. I was just at a place of personal awareness that I thought, why push this? If it's not good for me, do something else. I gave myself permission finally to walk a different path.
And what has that path been?
Well, initially it was commitment to my mother until her death. And that had a security built in it for me, because it gave me 5 years to explore my options. And I went through several employment changes. And then I got into the physical disability with my hips. And so I also teetered on financial insecurity with that, and I thought, and then forcibly retired because of my hips, and I thought, I don't need work to give me value. I was eligible for Social Security. I had brothers-in-law and older sisters that said, "You're going to regret this. You like to travel, and you're not going to be able to afford travel." And I also embraced sustainable living, and I traveled because that's where work took me.
Right.
And I was satisfied with the traveling I'd done, and I thought books are a way of traveling, music is a way of traveling. I didn't need physical, I didn't have the energy, not much less the money and time to do travel. I didn't know why they thought I would be that landlocked. I don't need that.
What has been the proudest moment in your life, or some of the proudest moments in your life?
I really have enjoyed the honor that I have in the community by people who learn my past and consider my experiences as a wealth, and that I have the supreme delight of visiting and sharing of that wealth with people. And I do have a way of helping people get past critical points in their life. I have a mellowing effect on people. In fact, you might get bored listening to this because my voice drones after a while. I think sometimes my voice can I had that experience with a psychiatrist. After we visited for 50 minutes, I was putting her to sleep. And she made me aware that even the tone of voice I was using had a hypnotic effect on people, and that maybe I should think about speaking differently or with better inflection to make my tone interesting. And that's been real instructive to me, that monotones is a way of hypnotizing people, and so you have to keep content interesting as well. And well, of course, my life story is interesting to me, but not always that to everybody. And Indians taught me that well. My experience of studying at Dull Knife College, being the minority student among American Indians, was fantastic. Just they needed me because they didn't have good study skills. They just made it through basic education, and I taught them how to apply the learning we were doing in the classes.
Did you teach at this
No,
college? You were a student. You were a student.
And so the material was new to me as it was to them, but I had ways of processing the information that it didn't overwhelm me. And so we would meet in study groups between classes, and they esteemed me as their teacher as much as they did our professors.
Where was the college?
In Montana, Lame Deer, Montana.
And what were you studying there?
Drug and alcohol education.
Oh,
that's when I became.
So you could be a
I
counselor.
was changing. When they looked at my not resume, college transcripts. You know, you have to present your transcripts when you apply, when you matriculate at a college. And the dean looked at my stuff and he said, "What can we teach you?" Because I had a master's degree already by then, and they were an undergrad college.
Oh, no.
And I said, drug and alcohol education. I said, I want an associate degree so that I can work with addicts and help people avoid addiction. And he said, okay, we can do that.
And where were you a counselor for drug and alcohol?
Well, when I finished that degree in my 2.5 years, less than 2 years, I took an internship at an inpatient facility for adolescent and adult addicts. It was Thunder Child Treatment Center. It was all Native American. And enjoyed the fact that I was sympathetic to Native American experience of addiction and how it exacerbated their problems with white people, because generally it was white people that attracted them to drinking and preyed on them really with their addiction. And from there I went to Helena, Montana, and I was at an independent clinic, but they had a number of Indians coming through that they didn't know how to deal with as well. Indians that weren't on reservations, typically urban Indians, had a much more difficult time with recidivism and that. I knew that from studying with them, and I worked with them for a year and a half. Already by the time I was finishing my work with them, I was preparing to go overseas to do addiction work with the people in Papua New Guinea culture.
Had you already been in Papua New Guinea?
No.
Okay.
I went back to the reservation. I think I'd just gone through surgery and was going to be 6 more months on the reservation. And so I got employment at the local clinic in Lame Deer. I worked there for 6 months and then came back to Indiana. I was diagnosed with hip trouble, and I had to have a hip replacement before I could go overseas. So I was training for the mission work while I was getting the hip replacement, recuperating from that. And I did travel that summer before the hip replacement as a companion to a woman that was going over to do professional work with the people, just for, I think we were there 2 or 3 weeks. And so they wanted me to do an on-site visit to be sure that I wasn't afraid. It was a very risky, politically unsafe thing at the time, and so I was glad our administrators wanted to let us test the waters, because most of the women who went over there went blindly, sight unseen, to do it. So.
And you decided to go, though?
I did.
How long did you stay?
I stayed there 2 years, and I was really thrilled with the impact of my professional interaction, but I couldn't live with the American nuns, because the women who were there were at the end of their 40 and 50-year stays, and we were always in contention because I had a different worldview, I had a different view of purpose, and mainly I engaged the local people in the Pidgin English, their dialect, and that was an affront to the women I lived with. They wanted me to speak only English.
Now, when you say 40 and 50 years, you mean they weren't there for that amount of time?
Yes, they were.
They were there for that amount of time?
Yeah. So for them, it was their life work.
Yeah.
And very many of my perceptions of our work flew in the face of what they had done that long a time. They couldn't be. It was a whole paradigm shift for them. They didn't believe that their presence was intrusive or arrogant or upper class, but I perceived it that way, to demand that people communicate on our level.
Right.
And they just when the women, Native women, asked me they wanted to see that Love Boat. You know that movie, The Love Boat? Well, it was the Titanic. That was the year 2000 when Titanic came out. And the guys had seen it, and they told the women to ask me, because men and women couldn't see movies together, or it wouldn't have been well for them to, because they were subject to the same emotional instability as we were as young religious. And not my superiors, I didn't even allow them to believe they were the administrative team.
Mm-hmm.
There were 3 women. But I didn't even ask permission. I just knew that they needed to satisfy a curiosity. They won't understand that. They don't know what that means. You're going to start trouble. I said, trouble's there. The men are telling them about it. They aren't curious. If I don't show it to them, they're going to get the brothers to show it to them.
What was the trouble?
The whole first reel, the whole 2-hour love story of it.
And that was troubling?
They thought it was, that it was not. There was nudity in it, and as a culture, well, no, as a culture, the women were bare-chested until the Anglos came to the island and put clothes on them.
Mm-hmm.
And when they dressed up, when they painted their bodies for feasts, they were bare-chested. And they were not ashamed of their bodies. We imposed that on them.
Right. So what was your role there was to be a drug and alcohol counselor
To teach
for them?
Because they were the marijuana capital of the world. They still are. Papua New Guinea marijuana is called Papua New Guinea Gold. And it has an element to it that is much more stronger.
The THC.
The THC in the content is. And I said to them, much of the education was as much to the growers and pushers, the young people, because they were bundling it just like it was expected to be sold on the coast. They would get $20 a bundle for here, or 10 kina, and on the coast it was already triple the worth, and overseas it was quadruple it. I said, they're using you. You're slaves for this industry, and you're not making money. They got guns and money, and in their own ilk, they were wealthy because they were known as the rascals. They would get high and throw a log across the street and stop all the traffic and use their guns to rob people that were trying to get from one province to the other.
Mm-hmm.
They called them highways, but they were no ways. They were a main road.
Yeah. Do you ever miss
I stayed
Papua
in
New
touch
Guinea or
with the
different
women.
places?
I stayed in touch with some of the women at first, but I've gradually gotten away from. They remember me. They always ask about me, and I feel some. I wish to be in touch, but it's beyond what I can do.
What's in the future for you, Anne?
More elder care. I'm an advocate for the older people here, and I intervened some landlord behavior that wasn't very nice, and put together a letter expressing my frustration, and the landlords met with me, and it didn't change their policy, but it gave them something to think about. One of the landlords happens to be an attorney, and she was flabbergasted with how I framed my argument.
What was flabbergasting about it?
They have reporters. They encourage people to report on other neighbors. I break the leash law regularly by letting my cats out without a leash, but I had taken each cat over to the Jelly Bean just followed me over to get mail, and I let him in, and he came out. We weren't even in 5 minutes, and then Firecracker was out one day, and they were all curious. They know Jelly Bean, but they hadn't met Firecracker, so I carried her in. It was like show and tell to the bingo people, and that got reported that I had her in. And the site manager is highly allergic to cat dander, and of course I wouldn't have put her at risk. I knew that, but I didn't even let the cat out of my hands. I said, if there's an allergy problem, then I'm the one that ought to be banned because I carry dander on my clothes more than they'll ever be exposed to with the animal itself. It's on me. And I just made a case for enculturating people to rat on one another. I said, you want this to be a Christian complex and people open and coming to coffee and donuts on the first week of the month and getting together for socials, bingo and cards. And I said, I know a number of people that won't show their face over here because they're afraid of being reported. And it's only affirming the reporters as bullies. They have one up on the other people because they can report them.
Yeah.
I said, it's just not a quality of compatibility that I approve of. And boy, they listened hard. And they said that I was interpreting it way too. I said, I'm experiencing it. I'm telling you what I experienced. And what an affront it is. I didn't get reported for taking people to the doctor or the drugstore or the grocery store or helping them take their laundry over when they were having trouble getting around. Why?
And they're just minor infractions that people are getting reported on.
And she thought it was silly, that it was nothing. I said it was a verbal warning. In my experience of calling people to task, that's preparation to bigger consequences. That
right.
I could be asked to leave the area, and people have been asked to relocate. And but not you. We like you. I said, and my experience now is that I've been warned. So I know I gave him something to think about, and the attorney herself said, you write really, really well. And she said, I was also copying stories from email and internet. They are talkers. Older communities are gossipers, talk. And so I was placing stories there to inform the talk. Let them talk about stuff that's funny or just interesting that they can relate to. And they asked me to stop that because they're going to be reviewed, and a certification agency might take a dim view to even a religion-oriented joke.
Oh.
They used, it was a very poor basis for, but I said, okay, I won't put anything out. She said, put it in my door and let me make copies for people. I'll do that, but it can't sit out like the magazines.
Yeah. So is this complex, this senior living here, it's privately owned?
Yeah.
It's not attached to Monticello?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's Court Street Management, and I lived before this on their properties down at Old Mill. They own Fisher Street apartments behind the Admiral gas station there. They own properties in Monon and Logan, and they're doing well. And I said, I don't have an argument with you except that practices like this are offensive. And it gave them something to think about. But their purpose for the meeting was to tell me not to be so... I said I lost sleep over it until I decided to write the letter. Oh no, we don't want you to lose sleep over it. So they were glad for it to come to their attention, but not enough that they'll change the policy.
And the policy that you're challenging is the policy of...
Listening to people or encouraging people to report. Because the site manager's not here enough to know that I've had an animal in there. So they rely on people to tell them that so that they can tell me, don't do that. Well, I think I know that. And I don't think I'm a lawbreaker, but yes, I am a lawbreaker, but I think law has its limits. when I'm the only car on the road, speeding is okay. I'm not putting anybody in jeopardy. I pay my taxes, built the road. I can use the road. I'm too damn liberal for my own good. And that's why it's best for me not to be. That's why I don't go to church now. Why I don't do church. Because I not only left for my own mental, emotional benefit, but because I reached an impasse with authority. And I couldn't put bounds on authority. They were over me, and they were damn determined to control me.
Yeah.
And
but weren't you ever a part of that authority?
Oh, well, no. I challenged it from the get-go. When I was still vulnerable and young and impressionable, I was asked to be at a main table at this convent in Cincinnati, where maybe 8 or 10 houses of us gathered. It was probably 30 to 50 nuns at this big convent, and I was asked to sit at the speaker table. I was a conversationalist. I could engage ideas. Well, the guy was a canon lawyer and a Jesuit priest, and he said, at the end of the meal, he said to me, and not to, there were probably 8 other women at the table, "You're a very nice person, but you're a lawbreaker." And I was stunned. I had never had that perception of myself. I was a goody two-shoes. My friends said, "How, Anne?"
Yeah, how were you a lawbreaker?
Because, and other girls, now that I thought of it, other young women who were asked to leave community before me said, "Werner, how did you get by?" Because I did dance to my own drummer all the while. I looked good.
On paper.
But they knew that I had my own interpretation. And I didn't think of myself as a lawbreaker. I just thought rules were not gold. They had their limits, and all law does, I believe. And so I'm a free thinker, a libertarian.
Which is dangerous when
it is dangerous.
You're in a highly structured organization.
Oh my,
like
yes.
That. Yeah.
I didn't perceive myself as a troublemaker, but until the end of that. Well, in Papua New Guinea I knew I was, and I thought those women needed to be confronted. That was abuse of authority. And I would stand toe-to-toe with them. And one of the 3 she got that close to me, that much in my face with her anger. And by that time I had confronted enough abuse of authority that I stood my ground, and she railed, and her face changed color.
But you didn't get mad?
It was really a scary thing when I think of it. It was the stuff of horror movies.
Yeah.
And she raged and raged. "What right did you have?" She unplugged the computer from the phone line, and because the phones were down, there was no phone service in this main mission compound. Well, an hour after she unplugged it, I heard the phone in the Swiss sisters lived that close to us, that I heard their phone ring.
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Hey, phone service is back on." There were only 2 or 3 other nuns there. I plugged in the phone line and booted the computer up, and I saw them look at one another, the other 2 in the room, and I thought, they were intimidated by the one that had unplugged it. I wasn't. It made perfect sense to me to plug it in and boot it up.
So that's what she was saying.
She was waiting to get on. She had said that she wanted on after I did. And then when we learned the phones were out, that was her authority to unplug. Well, it made sense to unplug it to save the computer. If there was a surge when I thought it was an electrical problem that she was averting. Well, it wasn't. It was an authority, and they knew it.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't. I'm so damn naive. Well, I just won't give that kind of power to anybody.
Yeah.
And so I was deliberate about plugging it in, booting it up. In fact, so naive that I celebrated the fact that 96 emails came in, dumped, fast. And I went to her. I said, Martine, we got email. The phones are on, and we got email. And I knew by the look on her face that it was not okay.
Oh.
She didn't say anything initially, and I was still celebrating, so I moved back in to get my emails to read them as fast as I could so she could still have time on it. And the others left the room. And she
Thinking trouble was brewing.
She came in her robe, and they left. And she came right up to me. What right did you have? And she just railed. She screamed. And literally was that close to my face. And I remember distancing myself and just observing. I was hearing her, but just watching that anger take her over. And it was more a puzzlement to me than it was. It wasn't pleasant.
Yeah.
Get you, but
Yeah.
I was amazed myself at how I could really step back from it, not literally, but emotionally and mentally. I just would not absorb her anger. I had a wall. And when I let her finish exploding, and I said, do you want an answer? Just in that tone. Do you want me to say what right I had? Yes, I do. Yes, I want to know. I said, I have a right to get mail. Ah, she threw her hands up in the air and ran back, slammed her door, went to bed. I know I slept better that night than she did.
Yeah. And you probably didn't sleep very well, did you?
No, it did upset me.
Yeah.
I did go to the other women that had left the room, and just to say, I realized too late how naive I was, but I was glad, because too many nuns were too passive with that kind of anger. They gave it too much, and that's what neighbors are doing here.
Yeah.
One woman who is subject to depression, as I am, medicates it, goes to doctor, but she doesn't go to group. I think I've learned all this by participating in group and learning how to let other people's wisdom educate my attitudes. So one woman was not going to go to the Thanksgiving meal last week because another woman saw her grandchild, a teenage grandchild, come by, and she slammed her door and locked it. And I said, what's that have to say about you?
Yeah.
I said, who was behind the locked door? And why give her power to
Yeah.
keep you from enjoying a turkey meal?
Yeah, you just shrug those things off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she finally came around. There was another woman who couldn't bring herself to come to the meal, and I said, well, we'll miss you. And she said, that's all right. She said, I don't want you to feel. I said, I don't feel bad about it. I just wish you would come.
So you ate your Thanksgiving fine.
Yeah, indeed. And the other woman came back to me with that. She said, that made sense to me. Why give her power?
Yeah.
But,
That is a nice parallel. The nun who berated you, and then some of the actions that happen here, the restrictions.
So that'll be my contention with church, with government, in that it tries to have power over me. I will not do that well.
I think that's a good way to end it.